Namaste. Welcome to another episode of Such Conversations Matter. My name is Saurabh Nanda, and today I have Ms. Harshita Suneja as my guest. Harshita is a management consultant by education and by profession, but during the early years of her career, she made a big switch from leaving the management consultancy and joining a big NGO in North India. She was indispensable to the NGO. She raised millions of rupees for the NGO to continue their projects. And she was so important to the organization that her mentor and boss would not allow her to leave the organization for her to pursue her MBA in the UK. She has completed her MBA now. Let's begin the conversation. Hi, Harshita. How are you?
I'm good, Saurabh. How have you been?
I've been good. I've been good. The lockdown here is easing now in India, so things are getting better. Things are moving. How are things over there in the UK? Tell us. I mean, how has it been?
Pretty stagnant. Though it's the lockdown over here, the rules and policies are easier than the lockdown in India because, like, we could all this while we could go out once a day and to exercise and everything, and multiple runs to the grocery stores are allowed. So it's easier than India, and the fines are also lesser. But still, like the cities, like the countries, come to stagnation at the moment. So
Yeah. So
yeah.
how did you spend your time during the lockdown? What have you been doing, and how does your day look like, basically?
So Saurabh, I graduated from my MBA actually at the worst possible time, but the by end of March. So ever since then, I've just been doing investing my time in job hunting. I've done two online courses on Udemy, and working out and staying healthy because that's a priority, especially during this time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that it is actually. Well, I remember my time from 2009. I mean, obviously there was a crisis. There was a big economic crisis. I recently graduated as a computer engineer. It was just bad timing. There were no jobs, and all the companies would just say, "Okay, we'll probably call you in the next 6 months, maybe 1 year, 1.5 years." So, but this time it's just worse, right? What do you? What,
Yeah.
Are there any suggestions that you would like to give to the next class of MBA from your school?
Do a lot of small uh, unpaid projects or something, and that would be the new way of networking because now there would be no networking events. There would be no, like I was telling you, the MBA typical competitions that happen and college meetups that happen. That none of that is going to happen. So and companies are really cutting costs right now because of obvious reasons. So while they might have the same quantum of work, they might not. Obviously, hiring new resources will not be a priority. So it's best to to prove yourself, to prove to the company that you're an asset to the company, offer to do unpaid work, and then kind of take it from there and become more indispensable in the company. So that would be an ideal approach because all formal internship programs and everything is going to be on a halt for a bit.
Mm. So, like the real power of network is like this time, it is the real power of network which will play out for a lot of people, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wow, that's really
So
interesting. That's just another way of looking at things in the crisis. Well, okay, so let's begin the interview. All right,
yeah.
and thank you so much for taking out time. I know how crazy it's been over there. Okay, so first
Yeah.
question, Harshita. I wanted to ask you about your work in Katha. I mean, obviously, we've had so many discussions about it, but I just for everyone else to know as well. Please tell us what is Katha, what did you do in Katha, and how did you get interested in the social sector in India?
So, Katha is a non-profit that's been in existence for 30 years. So, they have very strong grassroots links in Delhi and NCR. And so a lot of so there is an element, an important element of any civil society organization is on ground delivery, being able to execute programs online in an efficient, cost efficient manner. What happens if if a nonprofit has existed for a long time is that they have very deep relationships within these slum communities that we go, the grassroots that we go, and these connections help us to implement our programs better. Because you know the dadi, you know the mom, so you know that they'll send their child to your non-profit school, and kind of the organization had cultivated these relationships in 900 slums around Delhi. So they were doing fantastic work in these places with generations altogether. Yeah.
So how did you get involved with Katha? Like, how did you decide to, switch over?
So I was working with PwC prior to this, where I was doing my management consulting. What happened was I was always consulting in the public sector, and I got an opportunity to monitoring and valuation project for a power plant in Chhattisgarh. It was the first coal-fired power plant in that area. And when we went there to do the monitoring and evaluation, I saw the impact of private capital on capital investment on development, because that was the first time those group of villages had received electricity, and how much impact was there on other aspects of their life in terms of education, professionally, even agriculture. The impact it had, that really moved me, and I wanted to pivot into the social sector where there is this there's this merger of private sector capital, of governments, and the society. It's a perfect link, and I thought it's best to pivot if I want to go deeper into the social sector.
Hmm. And how did you get in contact with Katha? So how did that journey begin?
So I was actually, that's quite straightforward. I was doing a project with PwC Foundation, which was a wash project, a sanitation project in Ajmer, in the schools in Ajmer, and the director of the foundation saw my passion towards it even before I saw it, and he was on Katha's board, and he suggested that I must go and apply over there. And this is the best time to it's like, if you're in consulting, you remain a generalist, you're sitting in an office just consulting, but he's like, you want to see this be implemented, be on the ground, learn now. It's the best time to do this. So I went ahead and made the shift.
Wow. So you had the perfect mentor, or perfect guide that time, who could convince you. So being a career consultant, there's an important question which just organically built up here, and I have to ask that question. So to get into the social impact sector or the non-profit NGO sector, what is the single most important thing you need? You just said passion. Is passion the single most important ingredient to get into the social sector?
It's the only thing. It's not even the most important thing. It's only the only thing, because through my MBA, I've also worked in the impact investing sector in London, and just because this sector is never going to be as rewarding financially, monetarily, as the private sector. So if you're an investment analyst in a Goldman Sachs, it's very different from being an investment analyst with an investment with impact investing industry. So you really need to prioritize in your head that development of the society is more important than the financial rewards I am receiving. So I think passion is the only important thing over here.
So, I mean, I get it. Passion is the single most, or probably the only important thing. But didn't your management consulting experience with PwC help you?
Well, that helped me perform my job very well, definitely. Consulting gives you so many analytical skills to think in a very logical manner, to think in terms of actions and consequences, in terms of the consequences having impact on the organization, the bottom line. So it gives you a lot of analytical tools. That definitely did help me with my job a lot. But again, I could do the same thing elsewhere, but you need that spark or passion to do this in the social sector.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us, what did you do at Katha? How did you include both your passion and your consulting experience to make lives better?
So I had a very nice mentor, Geeta Dharmraj, and she was the founder of Katha. she has a very non-profit head on her shoulders. She's also a writer. A lot of the books that Katha used to teach through were written by her. And she's so passionate about this sector. She was so passionate about development and about the impact of education that I was constantly inspired by her every day. And she inspired me a lot. So essentially, we used to design projects to solicit funding. So the funding mechanism in India is not the best, and it's very flawed how nonprofits are compelled to compete against each other instead of working together. Mm-hmm. So we have to solicit the private sector funding that's available, and every company wants to do certain kind of projects and they care about certain causes. So a lot of my work involved understanding what the corporate wants to do for their PR, for themselves, and then design projects and try to get funding from corporates. And a lot of it was also assisting the team that's on the ground with implementation of the projects. So it was both ways.
So let me try and reiterate that. So what you did was you kind of built a bridge between the big companies who wanted to fund projects with social impact organizations like Katha. And so you aligned their vision and goals with Katha's vision and goals, created new projects, and then helped implement them on the ground level as well, at the same time raising funding for them from that particular company, right?
Right. But it's slightly more nuanced than that, in the sense that, first of all, you can't approach any and every corporate. That every corporate will have its CSR missions. So first you have to find organizations that want to invest in education or women empowerment, because those were the couple of things that we were dealing with. And then after finding those corporates, then there is a bit of cold calling and talking to them and explaining about your organization, and then sending proposals in line with what their CSR objectives are, and then try to raise funding from them.
So this has been a very interesting question for me for quite some time now. How do you show impact from a non-profit organization? Like, what are the different tools that you use, and what is the kind of result or outcome which comes when you say impact analysis?
Right. So in terms of, this is a general problem in all nonprofits in India, is the accountability and transparency that there are so many nonprofits in India, and people are asking them what is the impact you're creating and how to measure impact, how to show impact, and the whole accountability and transparency of the project is a very pertinent issue. Having said that, how it really depends on project, on what the outcomes are supposed to be and what the outputs are supposed to be. Where the outputs could be to reach 9 lakh children, 10 lakh children, then we just do a basic head count of the number of children we worked with. Okay. And if it's more outcome based, then we usually try to solicit funding for a number of years, because those outcomes would be something like just the number of children that graduated from grade 5 to grade 10, or something longer lasting outputs, essentially. So we try to solicit funding for a longer period of time so we can measure outcomes, but usually it's very tangible outputs that companies want out of their projects.
Okay, so which brings me to the next question, actually. Why is India the NGO capital of the world? Why do we really need so many NGOs in India?
It is actually a fun fact. There is more NGOs per person than hospital beds. So wow. India is the NGO capital.
So much, especially during this time of coronavirus.
So actually, the nature of public administration in India, Saurabh, is very hierarchical. There is very widespread bureaucratic corruption that's there, and so many times the fruits of development planning do not reach the vulnerable publics of the margins, people living on the margins. So yes, nonprofits are important because at some point the government efforts are not enough to reach the last mile, and these civil society organizations are the links. Having said that, the there are so many non-profits now that it's become a race and it's become a competition where it was supposed to be all of us working coherently together towards our sustainable development goals. But now it's become such a competitive space. There is so much of duplication of efforts, and so it's a very inefficient mechanism. The market is so fragmented that it makes there are so many efficiencies in the supply chain. So these are very important bodies, but there is so much of scope to get the economies of scale, pool in resources, try to get maximum impact.
So very, very valid point actually you just mentioned. It's also known, like a lot of NGOs in India are also known to be complete frauds. There have been cases in the past where it was exposed that they were just taking funding from the World Bank or one of the organizations of the UN, and they were basically doing nothing. Are there any regulations in place to keep a check on such NGOs?
Yeah, no, the problem is with the method of funding. This to kind of ensure accountability and transparency, what I believe the best way is to do success-based payments. So if I'm supposed to get 1 crore, I will make sure to it that the organization doesn't receive the entire money, because such organizations, because I've worked with a nonprofit and I've met a lot of smaller nonprofits, they don't have the technical expertise to do financial planning in detail or to manage finances for that matter. So understanding that, it's best to do tranche-based payment where every payment is released when a certain amount of impact is achieved. Without achieving that impact, you will not get the next payment. That keeps the organization, and I've worked on such a project, it keeps the organization really motivated and people in check, because they know they have to deliver if they know they need the second tranche payment. So this is a very good way to increase accountability and transparency.
That's really great. In fact, I mean, I was having a conversation with somebody else, and they developed an app which was developed for NGOs so that they could upload whatever impact they achieved, like upload the activity what they did, and it could be clearly analyzed in real time what was being achieved and what was not being achieved. Another thing that I read recently was that a few organizations are using social impact organizations, not based in India, but I think in Europe. They are using blockchain to make sure that the textiles that we get, they are sourced from eco-friendly raw materials, and also there is no child labor involved. There are no sweatshops involved. So you are consciously buying textiles which are coming from the right sources. So they're using blockchain to do that. Is there any way to implement such technologies in India for NGOs to have transparency?
So there are efforts being made to do that, but there are so many inherent flaws in the administrative structure of India that it would be very hard to navigate all of that. And because it's the powerful patron-client relationships that last in India. The world is run by numbers and not by the need for development. So it will be hard for a blockchain technology to. While I do know of smaller nonprofits who are trying to do that, who are trying to implement, who are trying to make funding more streamlined, who are trying to make it less competitive, but I think it will be time before they're able to possibly navigate through the system that we have.
You mentioned the Indian administrative, services again, the entire administration structure. Can you give us an example as to why it's kind of difficult to navigate through?
As a part of our projects, we were supposed to work with government schools and work with the children to make them more digital literate, like more comfortable with digital knowledge. So the Katha also developed an app to make it happen. But it was very difficult to convince government schools to let us run this program where we get the appliances, where we get the content and work with the children, because the teachers did not feel like the teachers felt slightly threatened. So it's just so many government schools that we had funding for and we could help were just not open to the idea because they were not comfortable, and because it's their discretion. It's not like we are working with the state government that we could imply these. But yeah, there are problems within the system to kind of implement it effectively.
This is the second time I'm hearing that, because a few weeks back I interviewed another friend of mine, and he developed an app, which was basically to improve transparency in government schemes. And he said something very similar. He said, when you try to give suggestions or bring these new ideas to the government, they feel threatened. Why
Yeah,
do they feel threatened? Why? What is the reason? I mean, you're trying to help them do their job better, right?
but it's just challenging everything they believe in. It's some methods have worked for them for decades, and they feel that if that works, there is no incentive for them to make any extra effort, essentially. So that is why they just resist it. There is no incentive. Even if the government school I'm working was with had all the children in a batch were comfortable and uh, comfortably digital literate and able to use apps and learn through it, the government school has nothing to gain. The children have nothing to gain, probably a photograph या photo. That's what the principal told us, that आप आओगे, आप ये सब करोगे, बच्चे सीखेंगे, आप हमारा फोटो लोगे, फेसबुक पे डालोगे, हमें क्या मिलेगा? So there is no incentive for them to change.
Okay, that's a very complex situation.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on to the next question quickly. So we talked about India and NGOs in India, but there are so many advanced nations in the world, including the UK, which also have a lot of non-profits and NGOs working there. As you said, for the last mile delivery of services or efforts. Why is it so that even in advanced countries, rich countries, the governments are not that effective, and you still need NGOs?
Because so many, this is my experience in the UK. So how non-profits work over here is very different, because over here there is a lot of culture of family foundations running non-profits and the causes that they kind of resonate with. Funding is not particularly an issue
charities,
over here.
Basically charities, right?
Sorry?
So they are basically charities which get funding from an industrial house or a rich family or something.
Yeah. A lot of rich families are supporting non-profits over here. But so there are two different kinds of non-profits over here. One is for very, very nuanced problems that cater to a niche. Like there'll be a vegan society that's a non-profit that encourages people to be vegans. So those are not the kind of problems that we have in India. So there is this kind of a non-profit. And then other non-profits is, over here, there is no concept of marginalized people, simply because of the public system being more effective, in the sense the public takes care of your education and the NHS takes care of your healthcare. So the people have a certain amount of protection, and there's no marginalized. But there are groups of people that cannot access access the benefits the government already gives them. So that might be some refugees, that might be religious smaller minorities, that might be people who are much significantly older and need help. So the non-profits are catering to very niched interests than like working for the marginalized groups. So these are not neglected groups. Government still has them as a priority. Most of the times it's to help them get access to everything the government has to offer them.
Okay. So even if we prosper and become a better country, there will always be these groups of people who need extra assistance apart from the public system, what the public system can provide.
Right.
All right. So it basically means that such organizations are an essential part of our modern society.
Right. Definitely. They are the inclusive growth or social justice, equality. These are the smaller organizations that are able to enforce that.
I mean, for me, a person like me who just loves flowcharts and very engineering mind in that sense, loves efficiency. I was really against the idea of NGOs when I was in college. In fact, in one symposium that I was presenting my speech in IIT Roorkee, I actually offended a very famous NGO worker and author. I offended her so much that she actually left the auditorium
Oh God.
because I believed in the fact that, well, if you have such a big structure, I mean, in the Indian government, we have 20 million government workers, and
Yeah.
that is still less. So,
Yeah.
if you have such a big structure, even then you're not able to, reach out. That means there is an inefficient problem in the structure itself. But now, from that time, I have understood that definitely in the society there will always be gaps and loopholes which need
Yeah.
to be, supported with the help of other organizations.
Right. There's only so much the government can do. The government can provide a policy framework which takes care of everybody. सर्व शिक्षा अभियान है जहाँ पे सबको access to education और right to education है. तो ये government ने हमें एक policy framework दे दिया that this is the government's agenda that education should be accessible to everybody. But now there is a remote village वहाँ पे एक school है, teacher कभी आए, teacher कभी नहीं आए. गवर्नमेंट अब उसमें वहां तक जाकर कुछ नहीं कर सकती. तब a non-profit steps in and says, okay, there is a school, there is infrastructure, there is people who want to study, maybe there is nobody who can teach. Can we take up this responsibility and help these children? We are working within a broader framework that the government has provided, but that's what the government can do. These organizations should be recognized more because these are the alternate tools through which government is achieving its targets.
All right. That makes a lot of sense, actually. So, there is this Azim Premji Foundation or Fellowship
Right.
that you also attended. What was that about? Tell us what kind of loophole it plugs in when it comes to you as a citizen.
Uh, so that was a very interesting fellowship. I worked in Himachal Pradesh with a couple of educators, and again the same, like delivering education in a better form. So in smaller places, what happens is that the curriculum is usually not updated. It's very dated curriculum, doesn't tend to the learning objectives of children. We know better now. Now we know how a child's mind works, how learning happens. So how to so not to just teach for the sake of teaching, but teach with the hope of children achieving some kind of learning outcomes. So helping educators in designing education better, in effectively delivering education was one of the tasks of the fellowship.
So, my question is, I come back to the government again, that if the government is spending so many resources and spending so much money and effort into making curriculum which is effective at grassroots level, then why do they need people, fellows from Azim Premji Fellowship, to come and help them improve the way of teaching, the pedagogy, and the curriculum itself?
Because what the government makes is the designs, the pedagogy, the curriculum that they design is more generic. It is more with the view of covering some educational topics, but that's not how children in the marginal communities learn. They don't learn so objectively. Education has to be so over there. Our fear is different from what our fear was that, oh shit, what if we get 80%? Our fear with those children is that what if they drop out of school now? So we have to keep the education engaging, education fun, so that they are motivated to study. And because these are probably most of the time first generation learners, they don't have educated parents at home, they don't have parents who understand the importance of education. But this is when we keep the child engaged at school, and that's a priority here. Unfortunately, the government curriculum does not ensure that. And so many times the teachers who are teaching over here are from the similar context, social contexts, and they a lot of times lack the creativity or the motivation to teach children better. They're mostly deflated because they don't see a lot of people progressing generally. So in order to work with these teachers better, non-profits have more technical expertise. They have spent more time on grassroots. They know what the children want, what kind of things children learn, and they adapt the government curriculum with their own whatever activities that they're doing to ensure that the child learns better.
Okay, so one management consulting question here. All right.
Yeah.
So when you work at the grassroots and you work at the grassroots for quite some time, then an organization or the person who's working there, the fellow or the volunteer, can that fellow or volunteer create some sort of best practices which can be implemented further in other places? Can that result or impact be replicated in other areas? Is it possible?
No, because every place is like probably you can have something for Delhi, but every slum community is so different in how it is the composition of the slums, where people come from, where are the migrants coming from. So it's every composition is so different. Maybe for a school or a formal institution, it might be easier. It might be possible to create best practices, but generally it is very difficult. So I believe for different geographical areas, depending on the composition of the area, best practices should be drafted. There can't be one set of rules that can be followed everywhere, unfortunately, because of the contextualization and how nuanced these places are.
All right. So this is really interesting. Okay, so you can't really draft something of that nature which is applicable to all the regions. Understood. So in today's world, not the corona world, but in today's India, where the internet penetration is increasing exponentially and it's so cheap to afford quality internet in India, will that technology help in somehow homogenizing the populations so that all these ed tech companies, they can reach out and create products which are just more effective and more engaging than the government schools infrastructures? Is it possible?
Definitely, most definitely. So that's the reason for the recent uptick in ed tech companies, and definitely they see internet as a medium. But having definitely these products are effective because they're using data which is very cheap in India at the moment. But any product or service that you create, it needs to be complemented with an on-ground activity. Why? Because internet hai, इन लोगों को पता है इंटरनेट है, but 80% of the data that this was in 2017, 80% of the data that's utilized is on pornography. So we go to a lot of these places and they use internet for pornography or entertainment, and because it is so cheap and they want to be entertained, it is for non-profits like Katha and other organizations to ensure that the parents, everybody sees the educational aspects of internet as well, and starts to use an internet device for educational purposes as well. So any product that you come up with has to be complemented with on-ground activities, with promotional campaigns, with very strong campaigning with schools and everything, with parents, to explain to them that the phone or internet iske liye bhi padhai ke liye bhi use ho sakta hai. So that's very important.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's the people's behavior doesn't necessarily change even if they get access to all the latest tools.
Yeah, exactly. Availability of the product is never the issue. It's them seeing advantage for themselves in a product that makes them use it.
So that is very, very interesting, because the same thing I think happened in a lot of places in India during the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, also the Clean India campaign, where we were trying to make India ODF or open defecation free. But it's just people's behavior for so many decades and probably centuries has been to go out and do their business. They just don't want to do it in the toilet, and so people have to come up with innovative techniques of using religion or using public shaming or societal shaming, community shaming, to force them to go and use the toilets.
Exactly. Right? Exactly.
Were there any such initiatives that you guys took in the education sector? When you shamed somebody communally in the community, so that they would send their children to study or they would study themselves?
Send their children to study was a problem, because इतने सारे families में हम जाते थे जहाँ पे they would not let the girl who's 12 or 13 years old come to school because अभी इसका शादी करनी है, उसकी शादी की उम्र हो गई है, अब शादी करनी है, हमें इसको भेजना है. So our community workers used to go fight with these families that how can you get, we will get a police, शादी नहीं कर सकते 18 से पहले, इसको पढ़ाई करानी है. So many times this was a struggle that so again, अब हमारे पास स्कूल है, गवर्नमेंट ने करिकुलम दिया हुआ है, and as a non-profit we are helping the school augment whatever its educational offerings, and we are doing all of that. But if people don't come, then non-profit, government, किसी का सबका effort has gone to waste. So it was very important for us to constantly do this and change minds of people in the slum community also.
Mm-hmm. So you literally threatened parents with police cases if they would not send their daughters to school and marry them before age. Okay, that is, I don't know if it was too harsh or it was just the need of the hour, but I hope
it was the need of the
results. It was the need of the hour. Okay. All right, Harshita, one more question, one major question set.
Yeah.
So what is needed to make the social impact sector more powerful and more influential in India and the rest of the world?
Yeah.
So why?
It's also because the impact is not being marketed properly. It's a very tedious process, to be honest, Saurabh, because when we get funding from a corporate, there is so much of reporting on weekly basis, which is done. Organizations usually are not able to put together collective impact during a year or 2 years. So then the main problem is the impact is not being communicated well. This again comes back to the accountability and transparency of how organizations operate. Sometimes what happens is you're going to one slum doing your project, but reporting the numbers for 2 different projects. So sometimes you just, because we have to report and हमने काम किया और हमने वो कर दिया, it's not very efficient. तो collect numbers on ground भी अच्छे से collect नहीं हो रहे हैं. There is the lack of accountability and transparency. So one, something needs to be done about that. Second is, in this process, there's a lot of duplication of efforts. I'll give you an example. We were doing a project in which we also had to do something in Bihar, and another non-profit that also works in education, also in Bihar, in the same cities, was also working in the same schools as we were working. So they could be working elsewhere and making impact elsewhere, but because our mandate was same and their one mandate was same, we were struggling and we were stuck working in the same school, which is duplication of effort, resources gone to waste. There has to be a more there has to be a more cohesive approach for non-profits to operate, to share the rewards and pool resources, maximize your impact as a bigger organization. So that needs to be done. There needs to be more partnerships, more support for other people's operations than a constant competition. And there needs to be...
Who would do it? So, I mean, who would do this consolidation? It is not one organization. It's not about mergers and acquisitions, right? And neither is the government really, kind of facilitating any consolidation of efforts over here. So who is going to do all this consolidation of NGOs?
It has to be a joint effort on the part of a corporate that gives the funding, that ensures that organizations are working together. So if there is a Coca-Cola that wants to focus on education, they ensure that instead of kind of giving it as a tender to whoever gives me the lowest costing, make a group of couple of organizations that are working in different geographies with a similar mandate, have it be more uniform. It has to be a joint effort on the part of nonprofits and corporates. As a nonprofit, we've also worked with other nonprofits in other areas to access more places, go in the last mile in a lot of places. So it has to be an effort on our parts.
So, how you describe it is, I can see probably, some management consultants like yourself, sitting in these big companies, and they are organizing these efforts through different cultures and regions and geographical areas, and facing different challenges. So NGOs are like your ground level, soldiers, and you guys are managing the overall vision and controlling the narrative from top, right?
Right, in a way, yeah.
So now you have studied so much. You are, one of the best products of our society, having such good education and work with so many people. and companies hire people like you, big companies. Why would a big company, use a resource like you to do these kind of things instead of just improving sales?
Because companies are becoming more conscientious now, more than ever, because no longer is it a particular country government's responsibility that everybody has education, everybody has healthcare. These are now global problems that need a collective action from all stakeholders within a society. So it's not just my problem or your problem now. So the sustainable development goals are everyone's to achieve by 2030, and it's very unlikely as per recent research reports, but we all have to do that for the world to be a more sustainable place for everyone to coexist. So now it's everyone's priority. So businesses have more altered bottom lines now. They do want to give back, they do want development to happen, and it is a pressing priority.
So I'll be very frank with you. I heard about the SDGs for the first time in my life last year. All right, in the month of March, I was attending a lecture by the FAO liaison or the FAO chief in Japan. All right.
Yeah.
Now, Dr. Charles Boliko, very, very charming guy from Central Congo, and he's been living in Japan for 15 years. I was so enchanted by that presentation. I was so impressed by the entire concept of SDGs that I decided to start a project on it. And, we worked for around 8-9 months on that project in Japan. What I was surprised the most about was I consider myself a well-read person. I read a lot of global media as well. I had not heard about SDGs, and it had been 4 years since the SDGs were launched in 2015 that I got to know about them.
Yeah.
Why is that so? Why is the UN so bad at marketing?
I don't think. I don't think they're bad at marketing, though. It's just it's not come into the limelight as much as it should. It's just not been a priority even in the media. Like, there is not a lot of news surrounding it. But maybe probably that's a reason. But definitely businesses that we've worked with are now trying to be more SDG compliant, in the sense that have their activities that, have an impact on other than the bottom line, something other than the bottom line. Society is one of the things that they care about.
Okay. So another question about SDGs, okay, because I find that concept it is just amazing. SDGs is basically about collection of data, if you look at it, right? Yeah. So people who are sitting in Switzerland, in the headquarters of UN and all these people, they're getting a lot of data from everywhere around the world, and they're putting it together to see how much we have achieved, because there's a certain number you need to achieve for every particular target and every particular goal. Yeah. As you said, the data collection is so flawed at the grassroots level. And we are basically talking about NGOs, and Ashish Rana, the other guy I interviewed earlier, he talked about government offices, that there is data manipulation there as well. Yeah. How can we even, imagine getting enough accurate data to actually see whether we are achieving it or not? Is it a futile exercise to actually have the SDGs?
No, it is not, because you need these goals in mind to direct your actions, to know your priorities, to know a nation's priorities, to map your success, to know where you are lacking, to know where you direct your government's efforts. So definitely give us a framework with which we have to operate and goals we have to achieve. And there's no one person that stands to gain, but there's everybody that stands to lose if we don't. So they definitely give us a framework. Having said that, another thing that I wanted to mention in the non-profit question is that in order to make it more transparent and accountable, it's best to have third-party companies audit the impact and do the monitoring and evaluation to ensure that the numbers that are being reported are genuine. The data collection is immensely flawed, and there is no reason for us to not doubt the numbers that are being reported. Having said that, that is a flaw. but it is a step in the right direction in the sense that it directs our efforts more than anything else. That is just an administrative thought that might exist anywhere in the world.
So let's say, I'm an NGO and I'm working with, young girls in rural areas in North India. And I tell you that we impacted 1,000 girls. All right. So will you take 1,000 girls on face value? Probably you will not, right? No. So is there a number like plus or minus 10%? So it might be 900, not exactly 1,000, 10% margin of error.
Substantiated by evidence. Any number that you give needs to be substantiated by evidence. So if you're saying 1,000 people, I need to see attendance registers, I need to see name written, I need to see how many days did they come, I need to tally it with your curriculum. Every number, there is no margin of error in reporting numbers, but it has to be evidenced by hard proof.
Okay, so just now you said the same volunteer has to do so many things. It's actually difficult to maintain so many documents and actually create impact also. Will that person not get demotivated?
They do, and for very little financial incentive they are doing this. So it's like there's volunteers and then there's community volunteers that get some financial benefits, not much. But it is very deflating for them because they start with all passion, hum badlenge, hum dunya badlenge, and then it eventually starts draining them. So it is a very poor mechanism. There needs to be a centralized volunteer management service also that needs to be set up, but definitely it is very draining on people, and people do fall out. They don't always come. I have volunteered to be with one of the non-profits where I was associated for 6 months, but it gets very, very difficult when you are supposed to do everything. The school where you're going is not cooperating. The non-profit is not cooperating. So it's very deflating, definitely.
So definitely corporate entities and people like yourself, management consultants, they can bring so much good to the non-profit sector, which is so essential for our society's development today. And always has been. Is it possible for different companies? For example, you said, there has to be proper audits. So companies like PwC and EY and Deloitte and all these auditing companies, Big Four and all those, they contribute auditing services and people. And then companies like, Accenture and Wipro, they provide the tech background or the tech services. And then companies like, maybe even Zomato or Swiggy after coronavirus, not right now, they're not doing very well right now. But after the coronavirus impact, they can provide probably logistical support of some kind, and Amazon can do something. Is it possible to have a joint venture like that? Collaboration of entities. Is it really possible, or it's just too fantastical to manage?
No, there is definitely but to get multiple organizations together might be a nightmare. But organizations like Accenture, like EY, they have their own CSR divisions which collaborate with nonprofits, and so a lot of management consultants do pro bono consulting and help a nonprofit with strategic planning and setting goals and objectives, and sometimes with fundraising and everything. So definitely it is something that is possible. It will take a lot of effort and coordination, definitely. But this is something that should be done. The private sector also should be coming together, leveraging their expertise to help the organizations that need the help. So we've done one project with Katha. We did a project with an edtech company that was developing content and devices on which children can use this educational content, and we helped them develop that content with different learning outcomes. So we did come together, create a very good product that's now being given to children everywhere. So, yeah.
All right. Well, that was quite a lively conversation, Harshita, and I really enjoyed it. I hope you did as well.
Definitely.
And so, guys, that's it. This is Harshita, and our conversations have always been like this. And as I said, she's one of the most energetic professionals I've met. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as well, and I'll have more such conversations about the social impact sector in the future as well. Please let me know how did you like this interview. If you have any queries or any feedback for the channel, or if you want to ask Harshita something, please mention it in the comments below, or just directly message me on any of the social media. Thank you so much. Be safe and keep your family safe as well. Thank you so much, Harshita. Thank you for taking out
Thank
time. Thank you. Bye.
you. Bye.